Today we begin the finals of the Skilling Open as part of the Champions Chess Tour. We have Magnus Carlsen, who's the world champion in Classical, Rapid, and Blitz, and Wesley So, who's the world champion in Fischer Random or Chess 960. $30,000 for first place. They play today, then they play tomorrow. Oh my gosh, this recap is going to be so much fun. 2 Super GMs, 0 draws, and at the end we will watch 2 clips of reactions from the match, with one of the players being a bit more angry than the other. Alright, let's get into it. In the first game, Magnus has the white pieces, and he begins with a very classic Queen's Gambit, declined with the 2 knights. Wesley plays a line, c5, that he has played against Hikaru. Now after cd5, he plays cd4, which is exactly what he played against Hikaru, and Hikaru didn't play into the critical main line. Magnus decides to go into this critical main line, something that has over 250 games played, where the queens are traded early. And Black takes this position, and essentially Black is saying, okay, you can have 2 bishops, but I have an extra pawn for now. You're going to have to work hard to get it back, and I'm fine here. I have no queens, but I'm not going to lose this game. Magnus says, okay, sure. Let's see. Plays bishop c4, castles, develops his other bishop, backs up so his bishop doesn't get taken, and then trades one of his bishops for the knight. Why does he do that? Because now he can play rook e1, and it's really difficult to guard the e4 pawn. If Wesley plays a move like rook e5 here, Magnus has a few things, but the coolest one is just f4. And the rook just can't move. You can take en passant just to show your opponent you know what the en passant rule is, but then you would lose a rook, and that's worse than losing a pawn. Welcome to Gotham Chess Recaps, where we teach you important things. So, Wesley plays g6. Wesley plays g6. Take, and e5. And Magnus is basically like, look, man, it's 2 rooks and opposite colored bishops. Opposite colored bishop endgames tend to be more drawish. But we have a pawn here that can be a target. My light squared bishop looks mighty nice, seeing the whole board. Let's play. And he puts some pressure on this e-pawn, and he wins it and pushes it to e6. Now, in doing that, he loses his b2 pawn. But that pawn on e6 is his biggest asset. And he's going to try to invest his position around that pawn. So he plays rook d1 and g4. Plays rook d1 to go rook d7. Plays g4 to kick the rook away. The rook does go away. Now Magnus just improves the position of his king. This is good for all endgame, period. You need to improve the position of your king. Then he brings this rook back, attacks the bishop, brings this rook forward, attacks the bishop, brings this rook forward, sorry, not forward, sideways, and stockpiles, and is going to the d7 square. In fact, it's impossible to prevent the rooks from getting to d7. But Wesley's probably like, it doesn't matter, because the more pieces I trade, the closer I'm going to get to a draw. Magnus says, okay, look at that. I'm not going to go for that free pawn. I'm going to go for this free pawn, because I don't like that you have a 2-on-1. Very instructive moment from Magnus. Rather than taking the free pawn, he waits one whole move to go win the pawn on b5. a4. So now if you take the pawn on b5, I will take your bishop. You'll take my bishop, but I'll take your next pawn. So Magnus here plays g5 check. 2 sides of the board. Why? Because if king g5, which is what happens, this move is now a check. Very big difference. And on offering a rook trade, this happens. I don't take your pawn, I push. And Wesley blunders that the pawn doesn't have to be taken. Wesley totally blanks on this and forgets that on rook e5, there is the beautiful, and keep this in mind, it's a very important tactical pattern, rook b5. The rook is now overloaded. You're pinning the rook to its own king, giving it away for free, and then queen. And it looks like Black is about to make their own queen, but check. Everything in the position works out for Magnus Carlsen. e7, rook b5. Beautiful, beautiful tactic here. Wesley takes, queen, check. Check, 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 check. Black resigns. If anybody's confused, there's a sequence of moves here that Magnus calculated to be unavoidable loss of material for Black. Magnus saw this, that both sides can promote a queen, but one side has a king that went a little too far out into the open. So in the game we got king h6. If queen f6 would have happened, there would have been queen e3. If the king goes to h5, you have check, and the king is getting mated. You can do the calculations yourself if you'd like, but the king is stuck. The black pieces here are completely stuck defending their king, and after a sequence of checks, all forcing moves from Black. For example, here, queen f8, if you don't block you get mated in one move. Every single way of playing here is losing, and at the end, Magnus uses pure geometry to force pieces to certain squares and throw in this move, and the king is overloaded. It cannot guard the rook and the queen at the same time, and the game is over. Magnus strikes first. So we go to game number 2. Now, this game was very interesting. So it began with an Italian, which we've seen many times, a Gioco Piano, and I'm actually going to fast forward a little bit to this position. Magnus plays the move bishop to a7, which we haven't seen yet. Throughout this event, actually throughout top-level theory, we see bishop b6. Hikaru has played it against Wesley MVL. So everybody was patiently awaiting, seeing what was going to happen. Like, how was Magnus going to play this position? So he starts attacking on the queen side, but Wesley meets him right there. We have a trade of pawns. And you see what Wesley does. He starts immediately transferring his rooks to the open file, both of them, double stacking them, putting pressure on the a file. Magnus says, let me trade, which is a blunder. Magnus literally blunders. So how's it a blunder? Well, after this trade of rooks, you have this move. Pawn takes pawn, and the bishops see each other. So Magnus can't take back because he'll lose a bishop for free. So he plays queen a1. If he had played bishop e3, then Wesley would not take back this bishop because this pawn would get taken. Wesley would take the knight, leaving this bishop to be hanging and then breaking into Magnus's king's position. Magnus missed something here. He just must have missed. Maybe his bishop was unguarded. We won't know. But so Magnus has to bail out and just try to create some sort of chaos. But he's busted. Magnus is absolutely busted here. He's a pawn down. He has a little bit of activity. In fact, right now he plays a very instructive idea, b4, hitting Wesley here, and it looks like a free pawn if Wesley takes it. But what that does is it opens this diagonal for the queen, and the pawns are just doubled. Like, they're not really two pawns now. They're like one pawn stacked behind the other. So he still tries to create a little bit of chaos, but Wesley cannot be deterred. Trades the bishop. Oh, sorry. Trades the bishop. He was trying to trade the bishop, but Magnus plays b takes c3, trying to go for an in-between cheeky move, hitting the queen. Now Wesley plays queen f4, and all of a sudden, Magnus is just getting mated here. He's just getting mated. Pure mate. One move from Wesley. Bishop to d3 here. Threatening e5. If black plays e5 himself, Wesley can play bishop c4. If d5, you take. And now you are threatening not just to break in, you're threatening to come back. And there's nothing. There's just absolutely nothing in this position. But Wesley played e5 first, forgetting that Magnus can go queen d1. Queen d1 just completely covering this idea. And Wesley goes from +10 to equal, just completely equal. Of course, still a lot to play, but Wesley has no advantage anymore. The difference is that if he had played bishop d3 and queen d1 in this position, then Magnus could have, if this happened with bishop d3, queen d1, Magnus takes on d6. He defends his bishop and then plays e5. And the game is simply over. For example, if e5 now, not letting me go e5, I have a sequence of checks here that will win this pawn, I'll move my bishop, and I'll simply mate you. So Wesley blunders, and the rest of the endgame is just pandemonium. They both have less than 1 minute, they're giving checks, a million different checks. Checks. There's not a tremendous amount to analyze here. I'm trying to fast forward because 50 moves go by before anything happens. And then it actually starts happening. Wesley's the one defending. What is going on? Wesley is the one defending. He has to run his king to the middle. Magnus has a pass pawn 2 squares away from promotion. So Wesley's giving checks. Wesley is a move away from getting mated, desperately scrambling to give Magnus Carlsen checks and defending his king. Magnus starts pushing 2 pawns now. 2 pawns are running down the board to try to become queens, and Magnus starts running his king to the other side of the board. Now his king is going to be completely safe. If his king is going to be safe, he's simply winning. But Wesley fighting back here with little tricky moves that prevent the king from running forward. If the king goes to b4, it literally just gets mated. So Magnus says, okay, enough. I'm going to bring my king back. Okay. My king is safe in the center, except, he ran it too far. He should have kept it in the middle of the board because he plays king f8 and blunders mate in 5. On move 90 of this game, Magnus Carlsen blundered checkmate in 5 moves. King g7, queen f7, king h6, queen h7, king g5, queen h5. And the beautiful thing about this position is how geometrically aligned it is. The fact that one guy has a light squared bishop, which means that you dominate the light squares. One guy has a dark square bishop, and every piece is on a dark square. In fact, the black king only walks on the dark squares. Look at this. The black king is escorted along the dark squares to its doom on f4, and Wesley strikes back and takes a 1-1 tie. Now, before we get into the games, I did say that I had some clips to show you as we take it 1-1. So, let me show you a clip, which happened right when Magnus blundered this move. Now, for copyright reasons, I'm a little bit terrified that maybe they will strike this down, so I have muted the clip, and I will do a voiceover of Magnus's emotions. Oh, man. Oh, how could I do that? Damn! Oh, that darn Wesley. Oh, he's so good, man. Haha, can't believe Magnus blundered that. Oh, man. What a game. Oh, boy. Ha ha ha, what a relief. I live in a giant house. Check out my house tour video. Okay, great. We take a look at that. No, seriously, he has a giant house. He made a house tour video for the hype show. Oh my god, it was amazing. Okay, game number 3, the colors flip, and Magnus again goes forward with this. Now, Wesley, instead of c5, says, let's test your Ragozin. This is a very, very good defense played at the top level. Queen a4 check, forces the knight to c6, and now we get the bishop off the board. Then Magnus develops his bishop, backs up from the pin, and bishop d7. What makes this position extremely annoying for black is this pin. Normally you would like a dark squared bishop in between the knight and the queen so that you can move the knight. Because right now if you move the knight, I mean, you'll do the Botez gambit. It's a legal move, but you'll lose your most powerful piece. So we get queen c2, knight a5, and here Magnus Carlsen puts on his brass knuckles and says that last game was a fluke. Wesley, I'm better than you. Let's play some gangster chess. g4. Realizing that he should keep his king in the center, this can't move, let's go g5. Wesley says, you're a gangster, I'm a gangster. So now they're having a pleasant debate, two super GMs, about who is a gangster. They both play g4, g5, but he just goes back. Now many of you would be like, well, sacrifice, but you don't have enough here. You don't have enough. It's interesting, but black will just play c5, or even just king g7, bring the rook. You don't have enough. So bishop g3, knight e4 now, and h4. Damaging his structure, but uh-oh. 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 Knight is coming forward too. Knight takes c4. Now this pawn is not really hanging. If you play h takes g5 in this position, I will take... You have to take with the king. Sorry, with the queen. If you take with the king, I fork you. If you take like this, I can take this. And, well, it's bad to be down a bishop in a game of chess. It's another important lesson when you watch my recaps. So we get knight c4. And what he's trying to do here is trade off the knight, because that knight is very strong. But Magnus continues to roll ahead on that side of the board. Then he takes. And now, if dc4 would have happened, would have gotten maybe something like queen e4, queen e5, queen g7. So Wesley just doesn't take back, is what he does. He plays queen g5 first, which threatens queen takes g3, creating kind of a higher level threat. Then he takes. But here, we see why Magnus is Magnus. He plays queen c1. He realizes that now it's time to make the transition from belligerently attacking Wesley's king to the endgame. Because despite being equal in pawns, he has a mass of pawns which are more difficult to defend. He continues to try to get a queen trade, and he gets it, and then he plays bishop g2 and rook h5. And slowly turns the screw, just like in that first game, this time with the bishops of the same color, but this bishop very passive in comparison to the bishop that Magnus has. Wesley tries to play f5, g4, critical pawn break. A full loss of a pawn here, if you take. But bishop e4 comes, rook e5, h7, king g3. The activity of Magnus's pieces here is what proves fatal. We get bishop c6, bishop f3, and Magnus brings the king up and then finds the last killing idea, rook 5 h3. Not rook 1 h3, because that rook needs to guard the rook. He drops the rook back, slides it over, takes the pawn, rook d1, and the game is lost. Wesley cannot defend all his pawns. A beautiful game with an opening surprise, an attack, a transition to a winning endgame, and simply outplaying Wesley. Magnus takes a 2-1 lead. Magnus has the black pieces in the final round. Let's see what happens. Wesley begins, let me just turn off Wesley begins the game with e4. Now, any sensible person who wants a draw with the black pieces at the super GM level will play e5 in this position. We saw Magnus do it against Jan, for example. But Magnus plays the Sicilian, the most imbalanced, dynamic opening, inviting complication. Why? Well, Hikaru was doing commentary, and Hikaru said he felt like Magnus was actually trying to make a statement. Like he was angry. You know, he was trying to make a statement. He doesn't just want to cruise to a draw, he wants to win. He wants to win. And if not, he wants a fight that will end in a draw at least. Because 2-1, right? Well, Wesley goes directly into the open Sicilian. Now, Magnus Carlsen in the open Sicilian plays this defense with knight f6 and e5. This is called the Sveshnikov. It's a defense that he's played for many years. He has it deep in his preparation because of the World Championship match that he played against Fabiano Caruana in 2018. Magnus Carlsen, the past 2 years, has paved the theory here. All his games in the Sveshnikov are being used by other grandmasters around the world. That's what happens when something gets played on the World Championship stage. Wesley comes prepared with a line that's the third most popular in this position, Queen f3, not developing a bishop, not putting more pawns in the center. And this is the idea of Queen f3, which has been played in about 300 games, is that when black plays the move a6, you play the absolutely bonkers Queen a3. To the untrained eye, this looks like Wesley simply had too many beers before the game and is trying to flex on Magnus that he knows how far the queen can go to the other side of the board. If AB, you have queen takes a8, and life is good. But we don't get that, obviously. We get b6, and now look at this, bishop g5. Okay, Wesley's really flexing. You cannot take the bishop on g5 because you get knight c7. You also cannot play the very natural queen d7 because of queen c3. And if that threatens knight c7, if you take the knight, I take, pinning you. If you take, this is checkmate in one move. So queen d7 is also not possible, but Magnus plays bishop e7, trades, long castle. You say, Levy, what is that? Well, Magnus has to keep this defended. So Magnus takes a hit of the bomb cloud, kind of, and then proceeds to develop more or less naturally. And he's able to do this because the center is completely locked. White's most powerful attacking piece is stranded on the other side of the board, so while it does have some vision, it can't actually successfully break through. And now Magnus begins repairing his position. Wesley continues to sacrifice, and not continues to sacrifice, but continues to push away at this position. We get a take in the center, queen b4, and now Magnus plays this idea h5 and king f8. Routing the king backwards out of danger, maybe g6, king g7, maybe rook h6 and bringing the rook out. But then he plays this move h4. And Wesley says, that's a little far, my guy. I know I just brought this up. But what are you going to do on rook f4? What are you going to do on the sideways triple stack? This sideways thing cracked me up. It's like from, movies where like the straight up gun isn't scary, but the second they turn it sideways, it's scary. Well, the sideways Alekine's gun, which is when you stack 2 rooks and a queen, that's proper scary. He plays h3, and Wesley doesn't even take. He just leaves the pawn there to take it in the future. Now we get bishop c8 and a4. So Wesley playing on both sides of the board. Rook e4, pinning the knight to the rook, queen c7, rook h4, trying to trade the rook. He does trade the rook, and maybe he has an idea now to just invade on the h-file. I mean, Magnus's h-pawn shenanigans have gone too far, and maybe they're going to backfire, because who's going to defend the king? The bishop's coming to defend the king. We get rook h5 here. This is the problem. This is just the problem. So, for example, like let's say g6, now rook h6. If king g7 chasing, queen h4. Who's guarding the king? Again, if we go back, instead of bishop f5, like, I don't know, let's say queen e7. The queen is coming. The queen's guarding this pawn, man. Like, that's the issue. Wesley is threatening on both sides of the board. The queen in the center is really the problem there. You can't just bring your queen. If, for example, instead of the queen, you bring the knight. Rook e4, maybe he has to come back. Knight g6, rook h5, maybe he didn't like that. I don't know, maybe Magnus didn't like that. But knight g6 would have been the more practical of the options. Knight g6 was probably the way to go. To, like, target the rook, make it move, open up this, go for a trade of queens. Remember, if someone is attacking you, trading off their most powerful attacking piece is the way to go. So a queen trade. Even if you're down a pawn or two, at least you don't get attacked anymore. But in the game, we got bishop to f5, rook h5, and queen c8. And Magnus just hung his b6 pawn. And then Magnus played knight g4, looking for counterplay on h2, forgetting that you don't need to defend the pawn on h2. Danger levels. Bishop a6. And the queen cannot stay guarding the bishop. If queen d7, then you play bishop b5. And this is falling. This is falling. This is falling. Now, in the game, we got rook e1 check, which did force Wesley to play king a2 and queen e8. The thing is, if queen d7 in this position, there is something even more funny that can happen. Rook f5. You say, what is that all about? Check, king h7, and the bishop on the diagonal. Magnus blundering that his back rank is extremely weak here, forcing the king out to h7 and this geometry. And that's it. Queen e8, rook f5, knight e3. Doesn't have to defend his rook if the queen is under attack. Queen e7, and Magnus played queen e7 and resigned. He played a move, didn't even wait for Wesley's response, resigned the game, and that was that. 2-2 is the final score of the day. That means the match is a tie. 4 wins with white. The person playing with the black pieces didn't win a single time. Completely insane day of chess. I mean, blunders, plot twists, more plot twists. Everything that you would want when a huge prize fund is at stake, when 100,000 people or more around the world are watching, including you guys who have been enjoying these recaps. I have promised you one final clip, right? Well, this was the clip of the final round blunder. Oh man, I can't believe he blundered bishop a6. Ah, rats! That's 2 blunders in one day. Oh my god, that's terrible. Oh man, at least my beard is better than Wesley's though. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. This first day of recap was so much fun to witness as a spectator and record. My friends, leave a comment if you enjoyed. I think this was my most fun recap that I've ever done. The chess was great, the clips were great, everything was great, and most importantly, you're great. Stay tuned for tomorrow as we decide a winner in the Skilling Open Champions Chess Tour Tournament #1.